know everything about anything, which I can make the philosophical case that means that faith absolutely must be intact. And I'm not talking about blind credulity, for example. I'm speaking about faith that is based on knowledge. And at the same time, we may see people abuse this thing. We may see things that God does as mysterious. But at the same time, we also don't know all the facts. For example, when we go to the law of God and they say, kill somebody or something like that, well, first of all, the problem is that we don't know the extenuating circumstances. We don't know. The law was a summary of what happened in Old Testament Israel that would basically, if this was to transpire, this would be the punishment. Now, was that always the case? Not necessarily. We don't have any court dockets to prove that. Sometimes God was merciful. I mean, the first time some of the infractions of the Old Testament Israelites, I mean, they would have been dead. There wouldn't have been Israel. So obviously, there are certain things that we can do. Now, as far as the historical unreliability of Scripture, I mean, if you want to go that route, I would be more interested in more specific questions. But I mean, basically, there is nothing in the entire of ancient antiquity that is more historically reliable in its transmission than the New Testament. And let me finish. Okay, and then you're more than free to rebut that. And we have more manuscripts, and we have more. First of all, we have the largest number of manuscripts in all of ancient antiquity, and then number two, it's the closest. The documents are the closest from the last written original, and this has been shown over and over again in scholarship. I mean, this is just. I mean, even Bart Ehrman admits it's the most well-transmitted ancient document in human history. But let me just finish. So you have those two tests. Homer's Iliad is in second place. It only has 600 manuscripts, and then the last written original was a little bit just before the dawn of Christ. And then the first existing copy we have in 1200 AD. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I don't want to keep going like we had before.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Okay. I would say your answer is totally unsatisfactory from my point of view, but let other people ask questions.
I just want to go back to an earlier issue, just to make sure we stay on the morality topic. I heard what I believe is a false dichotomy, and that is if there's no moral absolutes, then you're left with moral relativism. And I think that's absolutely false. There are no moral absolutes because morality is necessarily tied to the consequences of action. So if you take an action or a command, let's say, and set it apart, totally devoid of the circumstances in which it occurs, then you have no basis for which to judge whether or not it's moral. I'll give you an example. The Bible tells us that killing is wrong. Murder is wrong. Okay? Well, implicit in the term murder are the circumstances. So just killing itself is not necessarily wrong if, for example, you're defending yourself or your family. So it's the circumstances and the consequences that follow from those circumstances and the actions that determine whether something is moral. You don't have to be a moral relativist, which I am not, in order for you to see that moral absolutes don't exist. So I just want to make sure that we understand that distinction. And I hear it a lot, that if you don't believe in God's moral absolutes, then you're a moral relativist and anything goes. That's not the case, because we are constrained by the consequences of the actions themselves, and we can reason that out. And that's what we consider moral, are the actual consequences of what happens.
Your name, sir?
Brian.
Ryan?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Closest we got to absolute moral is in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill. That sounds pretty, or thou shalt not murder, depending upon your translation. But then the texts go on in other places in Leviticus, whatever, to describe the death penalty for disobedient children, adulterous wives, homosexuals, and people picking up sticks on the Sabbath. Should we implement those laws today?
The question becomes, again, it's a definitional framework of what happens in the Old Testament law. A really good book that can address those issues was written by Paul Courtney called Is God a Moral Monster? And what happens is again, the execution of those particular laws are not shown. We see the law and the consequence. Now, the problem becomes well, we can make this, but again, my question, first of all, is on epistemological level here. This is what we're trying, this is what the whole debate was about. How can we ground ethics? We may not like what necessarily God does, okay? But those things were implemented. First of all, Israel was a covenant people. God was showing that there's a certain standards for His people in order that they would conduct themselves in a certain way. But again, and I would take note or take disagreement with Dan's argument, again, without an absolute moral set of standards, anything is permissible. This has been shown throughout history. So again, Dostoevsky, a lot of the philosophy, even Nietzsche's Madman says, how are we going to redefine right and wrong? And again, the word reason, I mean, no, whose reason? And again, that's what I'm saying. So, I mean, the divine command is the only thing that really grounds ethics. You do this, this is the consequence. But again, there are other, what we would call, and Joseph Flesher wrote a book called Situational Ethics. At certain times, certain divine mandates and laws and things were implemented. But again, I don't have any court dockets to see how those were necessarily carried out. However, if, first of all, I don't, and the problem becomes, the other issue becomes is a logical one. Because if human reason is the reason, or the means by which we define what is right and wrong, then whose reason is correct? If we had a consensus of human reason, we wouldn't have political parties. I mean, human reason's different from person to person. We have moral chaos at that point. So God's standard is set. And granted, there are some mysterious aspects of that. Go ahead, Ryan.
We not only have political parties, but we have religious sects because religious people don't agree with that.
Absolutely.
In
Okay.
Jesus' time, there was the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes. The Jews couldn't agree. Now today, Christians don't agree. And
but I would see in Christianity, there's a core broad of essentials that where Christians do agree, and that there's a difference, for example, between a Pentecostal and a Methodist that's minimal versus that of a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness. You can definitely see where it steps outside. And those commandments within Israel in those particular situations, especially in the book of Leviticus and all those other things, again, we don't have any application of that except for the one man who committed blasphemy and he was given the death penalty, but we don't know the extenuating circumstances. And plus, the second thing is that according to the Christian worldview, which I will come from, is the fact that the law of God protects the human essence. It protects the fact that humans are sacred. So you should not kill, and how you label murder and how you label stealing, I mean, we can all reinterpret this, but those basic overall commandments, basically God is saying, I've created you in my image and you are sacred. Yeah, okay. I mean, and so those divine commandments, I will agree with you, Rye, there are some very mysterious points about those.
I'm sorry, you have not established that humans are sacred.
Right, so go ahead.
Right.
I believe there was
I'm sorry.
in Exodus, wasn't where a man was killed, stoned for picking up sticks on the Sabbath. And Stephen in the New Testament was stoned for for blasphemy, and there was a woman caught in adultery. So we know those practices were certainly in effect, and today in Islam they carry on our Old Testament rules of stoning.
Your name?
Oh, my name's TJ.
Yes, TJ.
I have a question. It kind of goes with morality, of course, and
Sure.
I have I guess like you didn't say like you said that obviously like there's you're not saying that all atheists are unethical, and of course
Absolutely
there's
not.
Christians that
Absolutely not.
and I kind of when you said that like well that's good, that's not
Sure,
not the problem.
no.
Of course, like if me and you were walking down the street. We're walking, we're talking, all of a sudden we look over and we see a man 300 pounds